One sentence, just 4 quiet words, was enough to drain the color from the face of a young Marine from Ohio. He had crossed a line no American soldier was ever meant to cross. He touched an Australian SAS operator's knife. What followed was never written down. No report captured it. The Marine never explained what happened in those few seconds. But within 72 hours, every American stationed at that firebase had absorbed one unbreakable rule. You do not touch their knives. Ever. This wasn't barracks superstition. It wasn't ritual or intimidation. It was the first crack in the surface of a reality the U.S. military would struggle to understand for decades. Why were these blades treated with such reverence and fear? Why did the Pentagon quietly classify reports on Australian SAS methods long after the war ended? And how did fewer than 300 Australian soldiers achieve results that more than 500,000 American troops could not? This is a story the military establishment preferred buried. A story of men who moved through jungle terrain like spirits, who hunted the Viet Cong with techniques older than recorded history. The enemy gave them a name, Maung, jungle ghosts. When American Green Berets finally observed them in action, their classified assessment contained only 7 words, 7 words. That shook the Pentagon. What did they witness in the Vietnamese darkness that forced a complete re-evaluation of modern warfare? Stay with me, because what follows challenges everything. Hollywood and history books have told you about who truly dominated the jungles of Vietnam. The whisper began at Firebase Coral An. American Marine had made a mistake. He picked up a knife that did not belong to him. The Australian SAS trooper didn't raise his voice. He didn't issue a threat. He simply appeared behind the Marine without sound, rested one hand on his shoulder, and spoke 4 words, so quietly they barely carried. The knife was returned. Marine never described what he felt in that moment, but the message spread faster than any official briefing. Within 3 days, every American on base understood. Those knives were not equipment. They were something else entirely. This was the first glimpse into a style of warfare that felt ancient, almost predatory. The Australian SAS didn't fight the jungle. They belonged to it, and once night fell, their presence forced the Pentagon to confront a truth it was unprepared to accept. Year was 1968. More than 500,000 American troops occupied Vietnam. They had unmatched firepower, artillery capable of flattening terrain, aircraft that ruled the skies, sensors, helicopters, and technology the enemy could barely comprehend. And yet, in the jungle provinces near Phuoc II, a force of fewer than 300 Australians was producing results that defied statistical logic. Australian SAS patrols returned with confirmed kill ratios 10 times higher than comparable U.S. Special Forces, sometimes more at first. American analysts dismissed the numbers as exaggeration. Commonwealth bravado observers were dispatched to verify the claims. A return changed. Their reports were unsettling. Their eyes carried something new, and rather than being implemented, their conclusions were quietly sealed away. Understand why? We must go back long before Vietnam. The roots of the Australian SAS were forged in environments far closer to Vietnam than anything American doctrine had prepared for World War II. In the Pacific, counterinsurgency operations in Malaya jungle, warfare where visibility was measured in feet and survival depended on patience, silence, and endurance. While American special forces evolved largely from European battlefields, the Australians were shaped by tropical hellscapes. Over years of continuous jungle operations, they developed something deeper than tactics. They developed a relationship with terrain. An SAS operator didn't push through the bush. He merged with it. This wasn't poetic language. It was doctrine. Movement became instinctive. Stillness became a weapon. Selection alone eliminated more than 90% of candidates. Those who remained were pushed beyond exhaustion into psychological territory most militaries avoided entirely. They learned to endure pain without movement, to remain motionless for hours, to pass through dry leaves without sound. Some could detect human presence by smell alone, and then there were the Aboriginal trackers there. Involvement remains one of the least discussed and most controversial aspects of the war. These men carried skills refined over more than 40. 0 years of survival. Skills no Western training pipeline could reproduce. A broken blade of grass told them not only that someone had passed, but when, how heavily burdened, even their emotional state. They could locate water by scent identify. Human waste on foliage. Days later, American officers initially scoffed until these trackers led patrols straight to Viet Cong positions that weeks of aerial reconnaissance had failed to detect together. SAS discipline and indigenous tracking created something the Viet Cong had never faced before. They were no longer the hunters. They were prey, and the true terror arrived after sunset. Enemy patrols began disappearing. Sentries vanished without sound. Supply caches were discovered and destroyed with surgical precision. Night raids followed no American playbook. Australians did not rely on helicopters or overwhelming firepower. They treated darkness as an ally. Each operation began with days, sometimes weeks of silent observation. Every movement pattern was memorized, every guard assigned. The camp's rhythm was learned until it could be predicted, like a heartbeat. The final approach could take hours to cover mere meters. Breathing was controlled. Movement timed to insects. Wind, rain. They became ghosts. When contact was made, firearms were avoided whenever possible. And this is where the knives mattered. Each blade was personal, modified over years, balanced to its owner's hand, sharpened obsessively. These were not issued tools. They were extensions of identity among the SAS. A blade that had taken life was believed to change, not mystically, but observably. It moved differently, responded differently. It had been blooded. Touching another man's knife wasn't just disrespected, was dangerous. The first detailed American observation occurred in March 1969. A 3-man Pentagon team embedded with an 8-man SAS patrol officially, cooperation unofficially, verification. The mission lasted 13 days. First 5 involved movement less than 8 kilometers. Covered daylight hours were spent concealed so effectively that Americans frequently lost sight of the Australians entirely. Silence was absolute by night 11. Conditions aligned perfectly. Cloud cover erased moonlight. Rain softened the ground. Wind masked movement. Patrol divided into 4 2-man teams. Then it began. The American observers were ordered not to intervene over the next 18 minutes. Sentries ceased to exist. One moment present, the next gone. No struggle, no sound. By the time alarm could have been raised, there was no one left to raise it. The main action lasted less than 12 minutes. No gunshots. When it was over, every combatant was neutralized. Intelligence collected. No Australians injured. Withdrawal took hours back at base. Reports were filed. Equipment cleaned. American team requested immediate extraction. Their classified report reached the Pentagon bearing a single line from a senior Green Beret officer. These men redefine warfare. Those 7 words echoed. For decades, requests for joint training followed. Most were denied. The truth was uncomfortable. Australian SAS methods challenged the very foundation of American military philosophy. Firepower, technology, scale. The SAS emphasized patience, terrain, integration. Hunting and some methods lived in ethical gray zones the Pentagon preferred not to confront, so the files were classified, but the warnings endured. Don't touch their knives. Don't follow them into the bush, and never mistake their silence for weakness. Because in the jungles of Vietnam, when the insects fell quiet and the birds stopped singing, the Viet Cong knew what it meant. The Maung were coming, and when they did, there was no warning, only darkness, then nothing at all.